Argue in Peace uses explicit language, so listener discretion is advised.
For the Jewish audience, we're not giving psak. This podcast is not focusing on what the halacha is supposed to be. Welcome to the premiere episode of Argue in Peace. I'm Avi Kahan.
And I'm James Sexton.
And I'm so happy to be here to begin our podcast series on conflict in personal life and society.
So the genesis of this, why are you and I making a podcast about conflict? It sounds like the beginning of a joke. A divorce lawyer and a rabbi walk into a podcast studio.
Well, definitely I do think that this podcast is going to be very, very entertaining because I definitely have not found a podcast where somebody could argue in peace.
Yeah.
I think people think that arguing peace means like a very, very peaceful, romantic argument. Like We're going to enjoy, like, hey, let's argue, but let's get along. I think it's much cooler than that. I think arguing peace actually could be a very, very, very high conflict argument, but could end peacefully. I don't think the actual argument has to be so peacefully.
You know, it's funny. I think this started for me without microphones. Like you and I met in the context of a conflict for clients. And we kind of represented different perspectives in that conflict, but I think you and I both approached it from different but similar ways. And our first 5 or 6 conversations with no microphones around were so interesting to me that I don't know which of the two of us said, like, this should be recorded. We should be having this discussion recorded. And then part of me, probably said, well, maybe we shouldn't record this podcast. There shouldn't be a record of this conversation because it has the potential to be, an incendiary conversation, a conversation that takes 2 very diverse perspectives and 2 very diverse people talking about something that we both deal with, but deal with in very different ways, and that is conflict. We probably should start by who the heck are we? Who are we to be talking about conflict? So it might be useful to introduce ourselves for those of the community who don't know us.
So I don't know about introducing myself. I could tell you why I think you're the best person I would love to have this podcast with and have this conversation with. I would say that the reason why, when we discussed over and over what benefit we'll bring to the table by having this podcast together, I realized that you're probably from, I would say, in the Orthodox community, the most qualified person to talk about the high conflict of divorce. And I think that you share this vast knowledge of different communities and how they deal with conflict.
Sure.
And I think your experience is going to be fascinating to bring to this podcast.
It's funny that you say it, and I appreciate it. I actually found my first conversations and every subsequent one I've had with you since fascinating for a very similar reason, and that is you and I approach conflicts. We're approached, I should say, about conflict for different reasons. So people come to me because they want a weapon. Like they say, okay, I'm right. And I need you to prove I'm right to a person who gets to make decisions about this. You were someone who both sides are coming to, almost in a judicial capacity, and I mean in a judicial capacity within the context of a best in, and they want to talk to you about why they're right. They're advocating to you. They're advocating, their own perspective and against the other person's perspective in many ways. And I'm consistently impressed since the day I met you with your ability to make people feel heard and understood, but then to tie principles that are important to them to the conflict. And that's fascinating because the thing that, look, I meet a lot of rabbis and you meet a lot of lawyers, but the thing that stood out when I met you was I have never, as a person really navigating the secular world, a German guy who went to Catholic school his whole life, meeting someone who would integrate so seamlessly, rabbinical wisdom and ancient scripture with the religious perspective of other religions. I mean, I've heard you quoting Socrates, Aristotle, Epictetus, the Stoic philosophers. I've heard you quoting Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. I've heard you, and you're integrating all of that so that when you're having a conversation with me, a secular person, a non-religious individual, you have such credibility. And you give me examples and perspectives I can relate to, but you always find this way to sort of pivot it to a Jewish wisdom, right? To something. I knew nothing about Maimonides when I met you. And you've quoted him so many times that I went, I gotta look this up, you know? I have to understand what he's saying. Like if, you know, there's no chance of converting me, but the reality is that
I'm trying.
I know, and I appreciate it. I think my mom would have issues with it, but I have to tell you, like, I could see how you were someone. I said to someone right after I first met you that if Rabbi Kahan was a stock, I would buy, because I think you have this ability to like bring people into the wisdom and into the thought and into it feels very modern. You've taken something ancient and made it feel very contemporary and feel very real.
First of all, I really, really appreciate that. But I wanna let you know that the first time I met you, what went through my mind is I'm gonna have a harder time doing what I do with other people than with you. And I want to explain what that means. Like, you're 100% right. You're exposing my major tricks and how I communicate with people. I try
a good magician never shows their tricks.
I know, and you're like in the first podcast, you're not even waiting to say it.
Listen,
like season 6.
We warned people.
But yeah, the idea, what I really, really try to do, and I saw this by an individual written by a guy named Shepherd Kitchen. You ever read his books?
Nope.
Shepherd Kitchen.
I will now.
Yeah.
Every time I leave a conversation with you, I have like a book list.
Oh no! And by the way, this book is crazy. I found this book about 2 years ago online. I think in Cambridge University, in one of their libraries.
Sorry.
So Shepherd Kitchen wrote a book which was his understanding for divorce and the history of divorce from the beginning of the church until 1910. And he discusses the evolutionary process of how it kept on changing throughout the different communities until he brings it into the United States of America and how they understood divorce in the beginning. It's actually a fascinating book. And in there, he starts in his preface and he says that divorce is probably the most problematic topic in the modern history because it has the most contradictions between custom and law. And it was a very, very profound statement that from all topics that he understood under the sun in the legal system, the one that has the most contradictions in how people actually act and what the law dictates is divorce.
Why do you think that is?
I think it has to be like that.
Yeah.
Divorce has to. Well, that's a different topic we'll discuss. Divorce has to always be ancient, always in order for society to govern. But we'll discuss.
Well, I guess that's why this is a good note to start on. Is that I think why listen to what we have to say, you know? And I think the answer for me, I mean, when I've been asked by people, they said, you know, you're doing this podcast with Rabbi Kahan. Why are you doing it? Are you getting paid for it? What are you doing? You know? And I said, no, this is really like a labor of love. And they said, well, why him? You know, why, because you're very respected, obviously, in the community by religious and non-religious people. And I think you have a lot of credibility with the bench and with the bar. You know, the judges know who you are. And when your name comes up, people sort of like nod, like, oh yeah, Rabbi Kahan's one of the good ones. And that's a rare thing in the field of divorce. I mean, it's very, very, because one side usually hates you, the other side usually thinks you're a genius.
I still have that.
Oh, no. Yeah, you and I, you can judge a man by his enemies, so we have no shortage of them. But I really do think part of it is that integration, which is that you really do bring together the ancient and the modern. And I think your youth and enthusiasm for what you're doing really shows through in the way that you communicate with people. And again, I've watched you do it now. When you're talking to a judge, when you're talking to someone in any community, you find a way to stay true to your core principles, your core ideals, the things that make you the rabbi that you are. You don't betray those. I've never seen you go against your morality, go against your faith, and you're open about your faith. But you find a way to connect to people who even have very diverse perspectives from you. I've seen you connect with, you know, LGBTQ community people. I've seen you connect with people that traditionally would go, I don't want to talk to a rabbi. That's not a guy I want to talk to. He's going to, from the go, this guy's not going to have anything to share with me. We have no common ground. And I think I'm fascinated by how much common ground you and I have, despite how many things we disagree about. And we both work in the clay of conflict. And I think we both have the ability to sculpt it into something better. You know, I do it for legal perspectives. I do it for, you know, $750 an hour.
Yeah, but you definitely enjoy it. I mean, I can tell you that I enjoy arguing with you. I really, really, really enjoy arguing with you. Like sometimes
that's good because we do it a lot.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes like I'm driving in my car like 3, 4 in the morning. I'm like, this topic, I need to argue it with somebody. Yeah. I need to really, really understand this. Yeah. I'll WhatsApp you. I'll say, hey, you're up. Like, you want to discuss this, and for 45 minutes, I'll just fight with you. First of all, it's great exercise.
We're doing like the text that's usually the booty call. You up? And that's are you up? Is you up? Want to talk about Maimonides?
No, but I'm serious. It does. I don't know about you. When I finish those conversations, I could come to my office. I could work the whole day. It's like
I'm so
energy.
amped
It's
up.
like
I'm so amped up.
We just fought about who's right.
I remember once I was driving home from a very long day at the office, and you called me about some obscure thing about a case, and we talked about it for like 30 seconds, and then you launched into something that you'd been reading, and I pulled over. There's a park near my house, and I pulled over into the parking lot of the park, because I was like, how long is this going to be? We're going to be like 5 minutes, and I want to walk in the front door, my dogs are going to start barking. I'll sit in the car, and I'll talk to Avi. I sat in the car for an hour and 15 minutes, just going back and forth with you. And I got in, and I had been like ready to, it's one of those days where like with the suit on, I'm just going to fall face first onto the bed. And I ended up getting in after talking to you, and I was like amped up out of my mind. I was so like, because it really is. There's something about the passion that I think you and I both bring to the work we do that is really fun to be, to have in conversation. I love talking to you. I really do. And I've said that to people. There are very few people. I get paid to talk, and I talk to you for free. I have to find a way to bill for it. I really have to find some way to bill for talking to you.
We're going to figure out how to bill everybody.
Thank you. It is about
I do think
time.
there are three, and I thought about this for a long time. There are three things that are needed in order to argue and really have a fun time arguing what we call in peace. It has to be with somebody who knows what they're talking about. If you sit in the room with somebody and you're like sitting and talking to a lawyer, and you realize the last thing they know about, or the first thing they know about law is just how to bill their clients, and that's it, you can't have a conversation. And I think that's also an important discussion. Why is that? Because I think most lawyers don't know the law of divorce anymore. They don't focus on the law of divorce, which allows that when you're arguing with them, you don't know the rules of conversation. You don't even know the rules of combat. You don't even know the rules of arguing, which I think is very important, because I think divorce law tells us how to argue. One thing I found, and why I appreciate that I'm able to pick up the phone and call you, is because I know the rules of the argument. I know what the boundaries are, what the lines are, what we're trying to focus, what we're trying to get, versus other times you pick up the phone and you call somebody, and like I'm just scared to even open up my mouth. Like, are they going to take this as an attack? Are they going to think that there's a hidden agenda behind this philosophical statement?
Yeah.
With you, I enjoy arguing because I feel that as a professional attorney and having been involved in so many cases, both in the Orthodox community, outside the Orthodox community, I think you established a tremendous amount of rules in your argument. I think people know your rules. I mean, they can't figure it out, what your swings are, but they know your rules. They know what the ring is. They know what the game is. And that's extremely important, because I think that's getting lost from most attorneys.
Someone once said to me that I would be very easy to assassinate because I do the same things every day the exact same way. I'm a creature of habit. And I see that as a discipline. I think I function best that way. But I also think it's comforting to people, because they know I'm predictable, and I'm unpredictable in court. I'm unpredictable, but I play by the rules. And if you give me the rule set, I'll play under that rule set. So if you say, oh no, we're going to play prison rules, we're just going to there's no holds barred, let's gouge eyes and let's go hard, then I'll go hard. If you want to play by the rules in court, though, we'll play by the proper rules in court. So I let people establish that. But anyway, we could talk about this piece forever. I think we should take a minute. For those who are not familiar with who we are, you're going to get to know us if you listen to this podcast. But I do want to talk a little bit about who you are in a very specific way, because I think there are people in the secular community who don't know who you are. I think a lot of people in the religious community know who you are. And I think it's important for the listeners who aren't to know who you are and why it is we're together. I mean, you're the founder of a Beis Din. And I remember when I started in this business, I didn't know what a Beis Din even was. I didn't know how to spell it. I'll say that for sure. I'm still not sure. Some people use a T, some people use an S. I'm not sure
that's
why.
A long conversation
I'm sure
itself,
it probably is. Yeah. No. But a Beis Din, basically, my understanding is this is a rabbinical court, and that you've sat as a judge in a Beis Din and sit as a judge in a Beis Din, and that you specialize really in divorce. You specialize in the dissolution religiously of marriages, which involves, in the Jewish community, it involves things like division of property. So it's not similar to, if a person is a Christian or non-religious, they're going to go to a mediator or they're going to go to a court, and a court is just going to apply secular law. Jewish religious individuals, I came to learn and now have a large part of my practice devoted to working with people who are working within a rabbinical court. So you are a piece of that rabbinical court. You are someone who knows the history of those courts in a way that I've never seen someone know before. I consider you a philosopher. When people say, who is Rabbi Kahan, I say he's a philosopher, because to me, a philosopher is a person who integrates whatever wisdom they find, whether it's experienced wisdom, like what you've learned as a parent, what you've learned as a child of parents, what you've learned as a rabbi, what you've learned as a husband, but also what you've studied. I mean, what you've actually taken the time and put in the reps to study. And you have an impressive, set of credentials in terms of your education. But also, for the age that you are, I'm used to talking to rabbis with long gray beards, and here I'm looking at you, I don't even want to know how much younger than me you are. You're at least a decade younger than me. And here you are having, served as a judge, learned how to specialize in divorce, worked as a scholar and really applying, and I'm going to say it wrong, halakhic, right? That is hard.
You got it. It's practice.
It doesn't come up. Yeah, chalamoid's what I do the reps on. Yeah, but halakhic law, okay. You seem to really understand, how to integrate that perspective into something that people who are either what I would call fundamentalists, right? So people who have a fundamentalist approach to halakha are going to speak to you and feel comfortable, and people who are what I would call sort of, cultural Jews, people who have yes, I'm Jewish, but they're not someone who governs their life by the rules of Judaism, or at least the strict interpretation of those rules. and I've found that you're someone who's been able to work with people of all faiths and integrate the wisdom of all different faiths. I mean, very few people I've ever met are able to do that. If I talk to, and I went to Catholic school my whole life, so I spent a lot of time with priests. I was an acolyte, all those things. And you won't meet a lot of priests who've read the Dhammapada. You won't meet a lot of priests who've read the Quran. You won't meet a lot of rabbis who've read the New Testament. You won't, but you integrate all of these. And by the way, you won't meet those people, and they also have listened to Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and they've read, Esther Perel, and they've made a point of integrating modern wisdom. So that's one of the reasons why I've seen you help people in all kinds of situations: husbands, wives, people looking to get a get. A religious, for those of you who are not versant in the term, a get is a religious divorce in Judaism. I've seen you work hard to help people get a get who were having a get withheld from them. I've seen you work with people who are withholding a get as leverage and help them understand where there's issues with that and why that's problematic. I've seen you kind of get right into the dirt, right in there with your sleeves rolled up and ready to talk to both of those people about their perspective, their feelings, how it comports with halakha, and how it comports with their own basic sense of morality and their love for their children. So there's really nobody I'd rather have this conversation with than you. And to those of you listening who are saying, listen, I'm not a religious person, I'm not somebody who believes in an omnipotent creator deity. You might even be the jaded type that I certainly at points in my life have been, that says, look, I know the right and wrong thing to do without having to rely on fairy tales. I think you bring, whatever someone's faith is, I think you bring ancient wisdom and ancient stories to the table. And whether those stories are the word of God or whether those stories are divinely inspired stories to tell us things, or whether they're just good stories, whether they're just good fiction, whatever a person brings to that, those stories and you know how to integrate them into someone's 2022 experience of life and conflict and family and divorce. So there's nobody I'd be more excited to do this with than you.
Thank you so much. And when I thought about it, I wanted to do this podcast for a while. I wanted to speak about divorce. I wanted to have a podcast about divorce because I really find it's like one of the most complicated topics that nobody knows what their next step is supposed to be. Like, there's no really proper written rules. Like divorce, and I'm going to try to prove it, it has to be ancient in order for it to exist. That's like, that's going to be part of my book. that I want to put out about divorce. But when I thought about who I want to do this podcast with, I don't think divorce could be articulated properly if it's not through the process of arguing and building and dialogue and communication and sometimes even a certain type of aggressiveness to give birth to the new answer that this couple has to go through with how they're going to deal with their new assets as living separately, how they're going to deal with their kids. These are like deep questions. And
I like that metaphor, give birth to the new answer.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because that's, I've never heard it put that way, but that's what it is.
That's what it really is.
Because birth is a painful process and birth takes time. You know, like there's 9 months where that child is growing. And then there's this unbelievable pain that women will say to you, like, wow, like if I knew how bad that was going to be, I'd have thought about it, you know?
You know, it is compared. I found I dated this back in, like, I think 1600 years ago, like in year 400, there was this compilation, a book written, and it compared, these are the words, it's loosely translated. There are 6 times somebody screams so loud that their voice goes from one side of the world to the other side of the world and nobody could hear it but God. Like a type of metaphor that it's so loud, like a dog whistle, like nobody could hear it. Yeah. And there are 6 examples, and 2 of them is either a lady when she gives birth, she screams so loud that nobody could hear her but God, and a lady when she receives her bill of divorce. Wow. Right, and it's like funny that it's both.
No, but
it's giving birth. It is giving birth.
It's giving birth. That's the metaphor that you used that I think really resonated. That it is about giving birth. I see, and I viewed it that way, but I never put it that way. And this is the thing about you is you have this way of like encapsulating or like a prism, like focusing an idea in a way that I go, oh wow, that's a really straightforward way of putting it, and that's the truth. You're giving birth to your post-divorce life, and that's a hard thing. And the only path to it is conflict.
100%, and it's needed. And therefore, the question is, who would I want to have conflict and know that I would give a proper birth? It's a very, very, very interesting, also weird question. Yeah. But who do you want to have this healthy relationship of logic and emotions, because that's what conflict is. It's a healthy mix, a healthy salad of logic and emotions. With you, I actually know I can have a really healthy argument and know that I could give birth, or we could give birth to a new solution. And I haven't found that with a lot of attorneys. And when people ask me like, oh, how do I deal with this case? Sexton's on the other side of it. I'm like, figure out the game, figure out how to negotiate. You're going to give birth to something crazy. There's going to be a new answer. And there's really no attorney that I found that has your experience, also your understanding of the legal law, because most divorce attorneys really forgot law altogether, but also your interest in debating every single topic and not being scared what the answer is not being scared where this is gonna go. And that's why I'm really, really looking forward to doing this podcast.
That means a lot to me. That's great. It really does. It means a lot to me. You, as a divorce lawyer, you don't hear a lot of nice things said about you, so particularly from the clergy. So I mean, that's pretty impressive. Thank you. I'm gonna put on my CV that respected by a rabbi. That's pretty good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Argue in Peace. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please consider leaving us a review and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is that you listen or watch. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Also, feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in future episodes. Get in touch in the comments or, of course, on our social media. See you next week for a brand new episode of Argue in Peace.